Alright guys, so I'm trying a new way to make videos, and I'm hoping that this way is going to really work for us to do this, and so I'm hoping this works out. But today, ultimately we're going to talk about something called the distance formula. But before we talk about the distance formula, we're going to talk about something you should be familiar with, called the Pythagorean Theorem. I hope that's a familiar thing, and I hope that most of you know what the Pythagorean Theorem is to some extent. Typically, I would ask the question in class, what is the Pythagorean Theorem? And every time I ask that, someone raises their hand, they say a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which is true, but I do need you to understand that in order for the Pythagorean Theorem to be a thing, I need a right triangle. And specifically, when we do this whole a squared plus b squared equals c squared, the a is a leg of a right triangle, okay? And so, for instance, this could be the leg here of the right triangle. And b is the leg. In fact, these are interchangeable completely. And c is something called the hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is always the piece opposite the right angle. So for instance, this could be my A, this could be my B, and this could be my C. The hypotenuse is always the longest piece, and it's always the piece that is opposite of the right angle, okay? And so when I do a squared plus b squared equals c squared in a problem like this, my a and my b, first of all, are interchangeable. So we do have it here as 9 squared plus 12 squared, which is fine. The other thing I want to mention, this is the first time in this class we've had something squared. I feel like it's always necessary to talk about really what that means, to square something, because the word square is actually in this. And so let me just take a moment here, and if I had a square, let's say this is a square, and I had to find the area of the square, because each dimension is 9, the area of the square would be 9 times 9, okay? Which is why 9 squared is 9 times 9, because there's this literal actual square here. We're talking about the area of a square. So when I square a number, it's because I'm squaring a number like this. So 9 squared is 81. 9 times 9 is 81. 12 squared is 144. Equals c squared. My next step is to simply add 81 and 144, which is 225. The last step, in order to solve for c, I very often get people who say that 225 is the answer. I hope that you're able to see that. So I get people, sorry, I just got interrupted here, but sometimes people put 225 as an answer, and I hope that you can just see that that doesn't make any actual sense. The nice thing about geometry is there's no way, like, we can see with our eyes that certain answers make sense or not, okay? So in order to do this step, we actually have to solve for c, and the way that we solve for c is to take the square root of each side, because the square root of c squared is just c. For instance, if I took 4 and I squared it, if I took 4 and I squared it, I get the square root of 16, which equals 4, and you can see I just go back to that. So this c, when I take the square root of c squared, it just goes back to c. The square root of 225 is 15, and hopefully you see that that answer as a length makes a lot more sense and looks reasonable, right? And the other thing that we need it to do is we need that number to be longer than 12, right? But it needs to not be way longer than 12. Like if I were to get 46, that would be way too long. And so 15 fits right in to where we need it to be. Let's look at another one. So in this one, the difference in this one, so what I want to do first is label my A, B, and C. Remember that C is the hypotenuse. So the difference in this problem is that we know the hypotenuse and we're finding a leg. We're finding a leg, okay? So I'm still going to, I think it's a good habit to always write the Pythagorean theorem down. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And then I'm going to just plug my values in. In this case, my A is actually x squared plus 12 squared equals 13 squared. At this point, this just becomes an algebra problem that we can solve. 12 squared is 144. 13 squared is 169. In order to get x by itself, we are going to subtract 144, which gives us x squared equals 25. And my last step is just like last time, we're going to take the square root on both sides to get x equals 5. And once again, if I look at that value, and I look at my other values, 12 and 13, the 5 should make sense, being how it is in this particular triangle. And hopefully this helps you to remember the Pythagorean theorem.